Welcome back to another episode of the Fight Night Quickie with myself, Newsome. Now, last week we did the video format. This week it's going to be audio. I am going to chop and change throughout the weeks, just depending on how much time I've got during that fight week. And also, last week the video processing time was about 8 hours, which means that you guys got the content much later than what you should have done and than what I hoped for as well. So, yeah, depending on how much time I've got throughout the week, we are going to be alternating between audio and video. But without further ado, let's break down some fights because we've got a really fun fight night here over in Auckland, New Zealand, with Paul Felder and Dan Hooker headlining the card. A phenomenal fight that we'll get to very shortly. But kicking off, we've got the lightweight bout. We've got Jaylene Turner versus Joshua Coolibau. Now, this should have been Jaylene Turner against Jamie Mullarkey. Really disappointed that fight, hasn't come to fruition. I was looking forward to that. I like Jamie Mullarkey's last fight against Brad Riddell. But we've got a good newcomer in Joshua Coolibau, a guy that is aggressive, the guy that will come forward close distance. He's got power in his hands. He mixes kicks in with his combinations as well. But the problem I've got for him here is he's not only fighting a huge lightweight in Jaylene Turner, but he's fighting upper weight division. He's normally a featherweight. He has fought 5 rounds at featherweight as well. So, he's got some long distance experience in regards to how long the fight goes. But I've got to pick Jaylene Turner to win this fight. Just there's a lot of red flags on Joshua Coolibau's side. Like I've just mentioned, he's moving up a weight class, UFC debut, UFC jitters, and he's fighting a really, really big lightweight and a guy that's been in the UFC a few times now. So, it's not going to be an easy fight for Jaylene Turner. He's got to make sure that he uses his physical advantages, stays at range, stays at distance, uses kicks, jabs, all that good stuff. But he's ultimately just got to stop Joshua Coolibau closing the distance, because when he gets inside, he can hit hard. Like I've said, though, there's just a few red flags around Coolibau in this fight. So I'm going to take Jaylene Turner to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got Priscilla Cachoeira versus Shayna Dobson, two fighters that are coming off a loss, but also two fighters that are quite fun to watch inside the cage as well. They're both happy to trade hands. They're both aggressive. They're both okay wherever the fight goes, whether that's offensively, defensively, wrestling. But predominantly, they're both strikers. And I have to lean Shayna Dobson in this fight. The reason being is Cachoeira, she just takes too much damage in a fight. She is tough, and that'll help her in this fight for sure. But it won't help her on the judges' scorecards, which is where I think the fight is going. I think when the judges are looking at this fight after a 3-round decision, they're going to be looking at who's got the more visible damage, who's a bit more cut up, bruised up, maybe a bit of blood, and who's landed the more punches. And I think Dobson's going to be the one landing the more strikes. I think Cachoeira is going to be the one looking a little bit more beat up. So I'm going to take Shayna Dobson to win this fight, and I'm going to take her to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got a good welterweight fight. We've got Maki Pitolo coming back again against Takashi Sato. Pitolo really had a flat performance in his last fight. It wasn't the cleanest fight either from a technical perspective. Really entertaining to watch against Callan Potter, who's also on this card, who we'll also be talking about very shortly. But yeah, Pitolo came in with a little bit of hype, and he didn't live up to it at all, really. Like I say, it was a really underwhelming performance, and he's actually fighting a fighter that I've not been massively high on so far in Takashi Sato, but he is a guy that is getting so much better each time out. He's with Henry Hooft at Hard Knocks 365, so he's got a good camp behind him. And like I say, I'm not surprised that we're seeing these developments from Sato. But I think this fight is predominantly going to be won and lost on the feet. Both guys are strikers by trade. They can both grapple, they can both wrestle as well. But like I say, predominantly they're both strikers, and I feel that's where the fight's going to be won and lost. I think Pitolo's going to be the aggressor coming forward, really trying to take Sato out of there. But the problem that I've got with Pitolo is he is quite defensively reckless, doesn't move his head off the centre line too much, and he is ultimately quite hittable. And both guys have been hurt as well, but I just feel that when Sato gets hurt or if he gets dropped, he doesn't go into panic mode, he remains calm, he recovers quickly, whereas Pitolo, he just doesn't have that vibe about him. And if you go back and watch that Cassius Kane fight, it was just a horrendous knockout for him to suffer. So, like I say, I think one guy's going to be moving forwards the majority of the fight, one guy's going to be moving backwards. But one of Sato's best traits and best attributes is his distance management and his danger awareness. He can slide in and out of range when he recognises that danger coming a little bit too heavy. So I feel that when Pitolo's coming forward, you know, winging shots and really trying to hurt Sato to the body and head, Sato in that sort of southpaw karate stance is just going to be sliding out of range and just firing off counters. And the counters is where I think is key in this fight, because one of Sato's best strikes is his straight lefts down the pipe, and I think that's going to be able to land on Pitolo. I think he is going to be able to land volume on Pitolo, and I think one of these straight lefts puts him out at some point in the fight. So I'm going to take Takashi Sato to win. I'm going to take him to win via knockout. And in the next fight, we've got a women's strawweight fight between Loma Lookboonmee and Angela Hill. And again, this is going to be a really good fight. You know, Lookboonmee's got that traditional Muay Thai background, decorated Muay Thai striker. And Angela Hill, you know, she's a UFC veteran at this point, but her striking style is Muay Thai as well. It's obviously not going to be as clean and as crisp and as sharp as what Lookboonmee's is. I don't mean any disrespect to Angela Hill, but Lookboonmee's spent a lifetime already competing in Muay Thai. So I do think the striking is going to be really interesting in this fight. Now, where I see Angela Hill's advantages, even though she might be at a technical disadvantage with the Muay Thai, is a speed and movement in this fight, because Loma Lookboonmee's got that traditional Muay Thai stance as well. So she's quite flat-footed, stalks forward, looking for the reactive counters, whether it be with the hands or the kicks. It's that type of stance. So I feel that where Angela Hill is going to have a lot of advantages in this fight is speed and movement, because she'll be able to come forward, she'll be able to move laterally if she needs to, she'll be in and out a little bit quicker, and ultimately I think that's going to be the biggest key in this fight, because even though Angela Hill is definitely hittable when she comes forward, she's definitely going to take some strikes from Lookboonmee here. I'm absolutely certain of that. I just feel that in regards to activity and movement and just looking better in the judges' eyes, again, spoiler alert, that's where I think it's going to go. I just feel that Angela Hill is just going to look that bit better than Loma Lookboonmee. I think it's a tougher fight than her last fight for sure. But like I say, if Lookboonmee does still use that traditional Muay Thai stance, I just feel that Angela Hill is going to be able to pick her shots, pick her angles, pick her timings coming in and out of range, and she's not going to have too much back from Loma Lookboonmee in terms of solid aggression. So for that reason, I favour Angela Hill to win this fight, and I'm going to take her to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got Cara France versus Tyson Nam. Both fighters again coming off losses. Cara France recently lost to Brandon Moreno. Brilliant performance from Moreno that night. And then Tyson Nam obviously lost to Sergio Pettis, who unfortunately is no longer with the UFC. I feel that this fight is relatively simple to break down. I think it's going to predominantly take place on the feet. I think if anyone does get it to the mat, we could see a few surprise takedowns from Cara France. But ultimately, I just feel that Cara France has got the edge over Nam in pretty much every discipline of MMA inside that cage. I think it's going to be won and lost on the feet. I think Cara France is going to be landing a lot of volume in this fight. I think his accuracy is going to be up. I think he's going to be ready to bounce back off that loss. There's a chance that he knocks Tyson Nam out as well. You know, Cara France does pack power in his punches, and when he really gets going and comes on the front foot and starts mixing body and head and his kicks into the combinations, he can be a real joy to watch as well. And on the opposite side, a real nightmare for his opponent. I am going to give Tyson Nam the benefit of the doubt in regards to his durability and being able to take shots. And I just think Cara France is going to be better on the night. I think he's going to win each round quite convincingly. And again, it's not going to be one of those where we get to the scorecards and not knowing which way it's going to go. So I'm going to take Cara France to win this fight. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight, we mentioned him earlier on, it's Callan Potter versus Song Kenan. Now, again, it's a very interesting fight because Song Kenan is absolutely the better striker in this fight. I think if Potter doesn't come in with a game plan to take Song down, he's going to end up landing himself in quite a lot of trouble and probably going to get himself knocked out as well. But for that reason, I do think that once Potter's felt Song's power and felt that he's probably going to be at a speed disadvantage, I do think that game plan's going to kick in pretty quickly, and it's going to be interesting to see what sort of Song Kenan we see, because this is the first time he's fought outside of China, Japan, Singapore, that sort of area, those sort of regions for the first time in his career, and he's had 20 fights. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays a part mentally, or if it plays a part mentally or not. But in regards to a style versus style, I'm actually going to take the underdog in Callan Potter in this fight, because I do think that game plan is going to be executed pretty quickly. Like I say, once he feels that he's got disadvantages on the feet, and huge disadvantages on the feet. We have seen Kenan controlled on the mat. He's not bad off his back. He still works, but I think Potter's got quite an underrated top game. He's just got to get Song down first, and I think if he can get him down in 2 rounds and spend a couple of minutes on top, he's going to take that decision. So I'm going to take Callan Potter to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got a fun one at welterweight. We've got Jake Matthews versus Emil Meek. The last time we saw Meek, he was over in Hamburg. I was actually there live at that event when he fought Bartosz Fabinski. I bet Fabinski is a huge underdog that night as well. And this is where Meek really has problems against his opposition, when he's fighting good wrestlers, guys that are heavy on top, like Bartosz Fabinski, like Kamaru Usman, guys that aren't going to separate, that want to close distance, that want to stick to you for the entire fight. But although Matthews is a decent wrestler and he's a good grappler, he's not that type of fighter. And I'm almost stuck sometimes in trying to gauge Jake Matthews and what Jake Matthews we're going to see, because some fights we see incredible performances where you're thinking, this guy is genuinely developing at a rapid rate, but then we see other fights like his last fight against Ackman, where it was just a really flat fight. There was no takedowns. It was more of a what you'd expect to see in the gym when you're sparring. So it's really difficult to gauge what Matthews we're going to see in this fight. If he comes out and tries to mix in takedowns, he's got a good reactive double leg. I think he can roll on Meek on top. I think he's a really good jiu-jitsu player topside. But if he doesn't, I think Meek's live in this fight, and I think Meek is going to have more of a striking fight in this fight than he's had in the majority of his other fights. And for that reason, I'm leaning the underdog in Emil Meek in this fight. I just think he's a little bit quicker, he's a little bit sharper with his strikes. He mixes things in just a little bit better than what Matthews does. And although Matthews, I think, he's going to be bigger in this fight and he's going to have more power in his shots, Meek can eat a shot to give a shot if he needs to. And again, I think that's going to be a huge key in this fight and a huge factor, because the longer this fight goes on, I just think Meek is going to be the one that's piling up the volume. The only concern that I've got from the opposite side is if he does start to pull away with his volume, I think Matthews will notice that and will start to trying to implement his wrestling. And this could be a very, very close decision, but it's a close decision, and I'm going to wedge with the side of the underdog here. So I'm going to take Emil Meek to win this fight just purely on volume. The combinations mixed in throughout the fight. If he can keep it vertical, he's not got bad takedown defense, then again, that's going to suit him as well. So I'm going to take Emil Meek to win. I'm going to take to win via decision. And in the next fight, we move on to the main card. We've got Kevin Aguilar versus Zubaira Tukhugov. And again, this is a really, really good fight and a really hard fight to call as well, because you've got Aguilar, who in my opinion has got the clear striking advantage in this fight. But then Zubaira Tukhugov isn't a bad striker either, but he's got his wrestling to fall back on. We saw him fight in Abu Dhabi not so long ago against Lerone Murphy. And listen, it was like fighting in a sauna in that. In that fight, the heat inside the arena was ridiculous. We had fighters saying that you could feel the heat the second that you stepped out the locker room as you were walking down to the cage. I can't remember who the first fighter was on there, but he had an interview straight away with the media afterwards and just basically said that he could barely even breathe inside the cage. So for Tukhugov to actually put in that type of performance and secure takedowns and be relentless in that environment when he was very visibly drained and tired and sweating, I think this fight's going to be a little easier if he's going to be relentless. I don't think it's going to be an easier fight from an opponent perspective, but just physically it's going to be an easier fight for him. We've seen Aguilar, at times he looks like he's got good hips and he can defend takedowns, but when you start chaining takedowns on him, he can be taken down. I think that Aguilar is going to have to keep distance in this fight. He's almost got to play it like he played the Barzola fight in the first 2 rounds, because if he doesn't, I do think Tukhugov can land on him. I don't think if the fight stays standing, Tukhugov's going to win, but I do think Tukhugov's going to mix in takedowns and have some top control in this fight. And once you get Aguilar flattened down, if you've got a good top game, which I think Tukhugov has, I think it's going to be a little difficult for Aguilar to get up. And ultimately, I see this fight playing out exactly that. Tukhugov's got to use his wrestling in this fight, just like I said with Potter and Song. if Tukhugov doesn't get takedowns, he's going to find himself falling down on the scorecards, and he's going to find himself losing a decision or getting knocked out, because Aguilar is tough. But I think Tukhugov knows where his strengths are in this fight. I think he comes out using his wrestling. I don't think he gets Aguilar out. I don't know what it takes to put that guy out, but it's going to be something special and something that I don't think Tukhugov has. I think it's going to be a decision, so I'm going to take Zubaira Tukhugov to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight, we've got Brad Riddell versus Magomed Mustafaev. And man, again, this is going to be such a fun fight, because on one side, you've got Brad Riddell, who's a decorated striker, spent a lot of time in Muay Thai, and he just mixes everything in so well from a striking perspective. It's no surprise that over at City Kickboxing, he's the coach of guys like Alexander Volkanovski either. His striking's on point, it's sharp, it's crisp, it's in volume, in combinations, and the guy looks like a really good fighter. I'm excited to see what he looks like sort of 4 or 5 fights down the line from here. But right now he's facing Magomed Mustafaev, who arguably is a one-dimensional fighter, but his kicks are so heavy, so hard. They come in all sorts of forms, a different variety of attacks, from spin kicks to low kicks, high kicks. We saw what he did to Fiziev in his last fight, and that was the first time we saw Mustafaev in quite a while against Fiziev. And I sort of wish that fight had gone on a lot longer, because I see Fiziev and Brad Riddell having very similar styles. So if we'd seen more of that Fiziev fight, I think we would have got a better idea of how this fight's going to play out. But even though Mustafaev is one-dimensional, the key in this fight is that one dimension is good enough to stop somebody who comes forward, who throws in volume, who throws in combinations, who is a technical striker. That those heavy kicks will keep Brad Riddell at bay at times. So Riddell's got to have an answer for that. Mustafaev's also going to be the bigger fighter, the stronger fighter inside the cage, I believe. So the power coming from Mustafaev is going to be, and the kicks is going to be really interesting to see if Brad Riddell has got something up his sleeve of how to deal with that. But he has to deal with that, and if he can deal with that, he's going to piece Mustafaev up. But I'm just not sure that Mustafaev is very easy to figure out and very easy to make those adjustments inside the cage. And if one of those adjustments and one of those things that Brad Riddell uses to get past the kicks and start to work himself inside is to clinch up with Mustafaev, again, I think Mustafaev is physically strong. He's got some wrestling up his sleeve as well, so it's not as if he can't wrestle. He's a Russian. He's definitely going to be able to wrestle. Is it going to be effective in this fight? I'm not too sure. But again, it's just things that you've got to consider. Now, for me, I can see this fight being one of those fights where Brad Riddell could easily get taken out in the first round, just like Fiziev was. All it takes is one of those kicks to land. But if he doesn't, I do think that Mustafaev can steal the first 2 rounds in this fight, and then by that point Riddell might start to come back if he's not too tired and take the third. But again, I think it's a fight where if it goes to a decision, it could be quite close. It's a tough fight to call, but I am leaning towards Magomed Mustafaev. I think he's got more ways to win this fight. So he could, like I've already mentioned, he could knock Brad Riddell clean out. He could grind on Brad Riddell against the cage, use his strength and use his wrestling to run down the clock, win the rounds, and he could win via decision as well. I don't know what Brad Riddell is going to do with his size to get through this power kicking game that Mustafaev's got. He's got a really tall task ahead of him, and also like I've already mentioned earlier on, he fought Jamie Mullarkey in his debut in his last fight, went life and death in that fight, took a lot of damage, but Mustafaev is a significantly better fighter than Jamie Mullarkey, and although Brad Riddell clearly won that fight, the rounds were a lot closer. He took more damage than I think he expected to, and like I say, Mustafaev is definitely a better fighter than Jamie Mullarkey. So I actually think Brad Riddell's got a tough task ahead of him in this fight. It could be close, but I'm going to take Magomed Mustafaev to win, and I'm actually going to take him to win via knockout. And in the next fight, we've got Ben Sosoli against Marcos Rogerio de Lima, and I really like these fights on this card. I keep saying it every fight, we've got another fun fight, but that's the truth. I think this fight is going to be another fun fight. We've got a guy in Ben Sosoli who is actually, some people argue De Lima is a small heavyweight after he moved up from light heavyweight, but Ben Sosoli is smaller than De Lima. But what comes with that is Ben Sosoli's got quite good movement. He's got quite good speed on his hands as well. His boxing's pretty good. So I think that when you're looking at striking versus striking, although De Lima's got power in his hands, they tend to be a little bit slower punches but come heavier. So I think Sosoli can be in and out of range, sliding in and out of range, uses distance management, pop shot De Lima, and really frustrate him with his boxing. But he's got to be careful of De Lima's low kicks because, man, they are heavy. And that is one of his biggest weapons whilst he's striking. Now, from De Lima's perspective, this guy, he's moved up to heavyweight. He was absolutely, I think he could have completely brutalized Adam Viscerek's leg if he wanted to, but he just had a willingness to grapple and take him down. And even the commentators at the time were saying, stay on the feet, keep hitting the leg, get him out of there, get you finished. But, he was insistent in grappling and getting Viscerek down to the mat against Struve. Dropped him with a big overhand within like the first couple of seconds of the fight. He grappled him. That fight stayed on top. Obviously, Struve must have been seeing stars for a lot of that round. But then in the second round, again, he didn't try to throw too much. He'd already dropped the guy. Try and drop him again. Struve's got big, long legs, worked the legs, but he didn't. He had a willingness to grapple, and that cost him the fight. Now, this seems to be a tendency of De Lima in regards to just wanting to grapple at all times, and that can put him in trouble in some fights, and some people may see that as bad fight IQ, which I could agree with absolutely. But in this fight, his willingness to grapple will actually get him the win, because we've seen Ben Sosoli taken down in The Ultimate Fighter. Once he's taken down and he's flat on his back, he doesn't really have that urgency to try and get back up to his feet. And if somebody is heavy on top and a good top player, he's going to absolutely struggle. I think that's what De Lima is. He's very, very good on top, and he can keep you down unless you like Struve and he can throw up submissions. Or you've got a really active guard game. You're going to have a tough time trying to get De Lima out of there whilst he's on top. So ultimately, this is leaning me towards De Lima, because I just feel that De Lima is going to have that willingness to grapple. He is going to want to get on top of Ben Sosoli, and especially if Sosoli starts picking him apart on the feet with the hands as well, which I think is a possibility. It's just going to make him want to grapple more. So I think De Lima's going to go to where he feels he's the more natural fighter. He's going to clinch up with Ben Sosoli. He's going to get him down. I think he's going to spend some time on top. I think Ben Sosoli's tough though. So again, I think this is a fight where we see the scorecards, and I think De Lima could easily win 2 or 3 rounds with top control here, as long as he follows that game plan. So I'm going to go with Marcos Rogerio De Lima to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight, we're in the women's strawweight division. Once again, we've got Karolina Kowalkiewicz taking on Xiaonan. Now, this is a fighter in Xiaonan that I've been high on for quite a while now. I think she is a very, very good striker. I think she's aggressive. I think she's got volume. She can take damage. She's got good takedown defense. She's shown in the last few fights that she can score takedowns as well. She can spend time on top. I know she nearly got caught by the Angela Hill triangle, but she didn't, and she lasted the round. But she's a fighter that's showing a very, very solid all-round game. And on the opposite side, we've got Karolina Kowalkiewicz, who is on a losing streak now since that Andrade brutal KO. She's not looked the same. She is getting picked apart. She's coming forward recklessly, a little like what I said about Pitolo earlier on. Zero head movement, getting hit, but will keep walking forward. But again, even though the fight is on the back foot, it's still looking good for them, because they're just landing so many shots on Kowalkiewicz. I don't think she's completely over the hill yet, but she's definitely showing obvious decline, whereas Xiaonan's just looking better every single fight. I think it's going to be a case of Kowalkiewicz is going to keep walking forward like she normally does. She's not going to be moving ahead too much. Her movement's going to be quite static. Xiaonan's just going to get off on a shot. She's going to rack up a ton of volume against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Yes, Xiaonan will take punches back from Kowalkiewicz, but I just don't see Xiaonan getting out volumed in this fight. And I think she's going to hurt Kowalkiewicz at some points in this fight. I'm not sure if she takes her out, because she is quite tough. So I am going to lean towards the scorecards. But yeah, I just don't see Kowalkiewicz winning this fight. I think she's just going to get picked apart, out-volumed. I think when the judges look at the fighter's faces at the end of the fight, the damage is going to be on Kowalkiewicz. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be another Kowalkiewicz loss. So I'm going to take Xiaonan to win this fight. I'm going to take her to win via decision. And in the co-main event of the evening, we've got 2 prospects that are actually coming off losses as well. We've got Jimmy Crute versus Michal Oleksiejczuk. And both of the last fights, you know, even though they lost, they both could have very easily won as well. You know, you look at Oleksiejczuk, dropped OSP multiple times in that first round. Everyone was expecting him to get him out. I didn't expect OSP to take that sort of damage. But Oleksiejczuk, even though he's an undersized light heavyweight, he was marching forward. He was landing to the body, to the head. Crisp, hard shots. And like I say, fair play to OSP. He stayed in there. He managed to last that first round. Second round, got the takedown, set up the Von Flue choke, or the Von Prue choke, as a lot of people are calling it now. We managed to get Oleksiejczuk out of there. Jimmy Crute, on the other hand, again, he was in there against a veteran in Misha Serkinov. He got taken down early, but he worked to sweep well, got back up to his feet, got takedowns of himself. His striking looked good, and he was 2 punches away from winning the fight. I think the referee said that, you know, 2 more punches and he'd have stopped the fight, but he made a mistake. He allowed Serkinov to sweep, and Serkinov ended up getting him in a submission. So, like I say, both fighters so close to winning, but they're both prospects at the same time. They're both young, they're both improving. I just think Jimmy Crute's making the more developments right now, and I think he's the more well-rounded fighter. You know, his kickboxing game is he's been under the tutelage of Sam Greco, who, you know, if you know anything about kickboxing, you know who Sam Greco is. You know, he's worked his magic on Crute over the years. Crute's kickboxing looks really good. And then as for Crute's ground game, you know, he's Jean-Jacques Mercado, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, you know, with the Mercado brothers. Again, anybody that knows anything about Jiu-Jitsu knows who those guys are. So he's a legitimate black belt. He has got to be careful in this fight. Michal Oleksiejczuk, like I say, he mixes in punches into combinations so well to the body and head. He's got a brutal liver shot, and he comes out fast and hard the majority of the time as well. And again, I can see a couple of ways that Oleksiejczuk comes out. If he comes out hard, he's got a good chance of finishing Crute, but Crute's got to weather a storm, and he's got to stay in that fight, because if that gets out the first round after a hard start from Oleksiejczuk is going to tire, and I think Crute can take over the fight from that point. However, I think if Oleksiejczuk comes out in this fight, is a little bit more patient, looks to pick his shots from a more patient perspective, I think that plays into the hands of Crute, because Crute, I think, is the better technical striker, and I think technique will show in this fight. So I do think, however Oleksiejczuk comes out, I do favour Crute. But like I say, if he does come out like a bull in that first round, he could absolutely catch Crute with on the liver or on the chin and put him out. But I just think that Jimmy Crute is more well-rounded in this fight. I think he's developing at a higher rate and a quicker rate. And I think he's just got more ways to win this fight. You know, I think he's going to really mix things up. I think we're going to see a takedown or two from Jimmy Crute. I think Oleksiejczuk might get up a couple of times. But like I say, I think Crute's got more ways to win this fight. I think he finds a takedown at some point, and I think he submits him. So I'm going to take Jimmy Crute to win this fight, and I'm going to take him to win via submission. And on to our main event of the evening. And like I said, this is a phenomenal fight. We've got Paul Felder versus Dan Hooker. And it's actually a really close fight as well, because both are predominantly strikers. I think we are going to see a striking war in this fight. I'd be very surprised to see this fight won or lost because of wrestling or top control and jiu-jitsu. You know, I went into tape leaning Paul Felder in this fight. I thought that fight with Paul Felder and Barboza, it showed me a lot about where Paul Felder's striking's at, because although I thought Barboza won that fight, Paul Felder was totally in that fight at all times. He was firing back with his own kicks. He was taking the kicks from Barboza. I can't count how many times he was hit flush in the body, flush in the legs, or had to block a powerful head kick, which must have still rattled the head of Felder. But Felder, he never looked in any real trouble in that fight. He didn't wobble, he didn't stumble, he wasn't visibly hurt anyway. So like I say, it showed a lot of where Paul Felder is at, and I actually think, even though he's a veteran at this point, he is aging, I do still think he's improving from fight to fight, and I genuinely think he's a good fighter. On the other hand, you've got Dan Hooker. Now, obviously, I just remembered the brutality of the fight with Barboza and Hooker, which it was brutal. And I know I say this every time, but I cannot believe the referee didn't stop that fight earlier. I cannot believe Hooker's corner didn't throw a towel in and call that fight off either. But that's a totally different story at this point. Now, obviously, when I went back and watched that fight, I just remembered that Hooker was, he was beaten up, and he was beaten up badly. But the heart that Hooker showed in that fight to continuously, pull himself back up and go back at Barboza and try and land on him, even though he must have known in his head that he was losing the fight. He was only a couple of kicks from being out of there, but just the willingness to to pull himself back together and just try anything, just try and land a jab, or try and land a cross, or just try and land a kick, just to try and do something. And that goes a long way for me. And I almost think that if Felder does hurt Hooker in this fight, I just don't think that's going to deter Hooker from keeping on coming forward and trying to, to get those strikes back. But ultimately, I don't think Felder can put that sort of beating on Hooker that what Barboza did. Even though it's weird because Felder and Barboza was a close fight, and Barboza didn't beat Felder up, and Felder was in there and he was throwing back as well. I just don't think that he'll put that brutality on Hooker in this fight. I think it's going to be more of a, he's targeting the calf kicks, and I think that's actually going to be Felder's biggest weapon in this fight. I think he's got to get off on those calf kicks early on, and he's got to try and wear Hooker out, because I do think where the striking's close, I think one of the biggest significant differences in this fight is I think that Hooker's quicker on the feet. I think his kicks come a little quicker. I think his punches come a little quicker. I think his movement's a little quicker. And like I said earlier on in the Angela Hill fight, I think the speed is going to play a big part in this fight. Like I say, I don't see too many wrestling exchanges. I don't see too many grappling exchanges. And again, I think a lot of these fights on the night are going to be going to the scorecards, and I see this as another fight that could potentially go to the scorecards as well. I just don't see Felder being able to get Hooker out, knowing how tough Hooker is, and unless Hooker gets a flash KO against Paul Felder. Again, Felder is tough. He's extremely durable. We saw that in the Barboza fight also. And I just think both guys are going to have a real hard time trying to get the other guy out. So with that being said, when it comes to a decision, I have to consider what the judges are going to see. I think the judges are going to see a quicker movement from Hooker over the 5 rounds. I think they're going to see the power coming from Felder, but I think they're going to see the volume coming from Hooker, which is what I think makes it a close fight, because it's ultimately what the judges prefer to see. Do they prefer to see the big impact shots, or do they prefer to see the racked up volume? And I personally think that if Felder really doesn't get off on that calf kick early on and slow Hooker down rapidly, I think over the 5 rounds, the volume is just going to be a lot higher on Hooker's side, and I think the judges are probably going to edge towards that over the big impact shots. So I'm actually going to take Dan Hooker to win this fight, and I'm going to take him to win via decision. And that's it for this week's Fight Night Quickie, guys. Thanks a lot for listening. Like I said, we will be swapping and changing with the audio and video. If anybody wants my bets for this weekend, if anyone wants to bet in advice, some fun gamblers out there that like parlaying fighters for big returns, or if you just want, you want to know the underdog of the week, everything that you could possibly want is at MMAplay365.com. We've even got artificial intelligence on there from a company called Sporter, whose software and computer algorithms run the videotape, run all the numbers, and come out with percentage predictions of who they think is going to win each fight. And they're now going to be including methods of victory in there as well. So they'll not only just tell you fighter A has got a 60% chance of winning, they'll also tell you that fighter A is likely to win by decision or knockout or submission as well. So go over to MMAplay365.com. We've got plenty of packages for you over there, packages to suit everybody, subscription terms to suit everybody, everything you could possibly need. So thank you once again for listening, and we'll see you next week for another Fight Night Quickie.